God created both male and female for his kingdom. And we do not have a balanced and a full kingdom if we're both not in it and we're not both working together.
Happy New Year, Women of SoCal. My name is Nicky Stade, and I serve as the Executive Director of Women of SoCal. I am so excited to kick off a new season of the podcast today. We have a great season lined up for you, full of great conversations and leadership principles just for you, no matter what area of ministry you serve. Whether you're a pastor's wife, a women's ministry leader, or a credentialed minister, the Women of SoCal Leadership Podcast is designed to help you know, grow, and then go. Each month, we'll have conversations around relevant topics that'll help you to be the best leader that God has called you to be. In this episode, I sit down with Tiffany Gaudin and Jenni Wong Clayville to discuss women in leadership, and we'll hear Jenni's inspiring story and all the amazing ways that she's breaking barriers in her area of influence within the church. Let's go. Welcome to the Women of SoCal Leadership Podcast. I am so excited to kick off this year's very first episode of season 2 with my very good friend, today's co-host, and a member of the SoCal Network of Women Ministers team, Tiffany Gaudin. How are you doing today?
Hi, Nikki. Hi, everyone. I am doing great. I'm very excited about today.
Yeah, it's going to be rad. I'm so looking forward to this new year, 2024. I just feel it's going to be good. I can just feel it. It's going to be great. So I'm excited.
And I'm excited about today's topic, women in leadership. You know, Nikki, that this is such an important topic and very close to my heart. And I'm just excited about getting this out there and having this conversation today, and the women that are watching, all the stuff that they're just going to glean out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more amazing than the beginning of a new year, and we're all excited to up our game when it comes to leadership in ministry and following our calling. So I'm just excited for anybody who's going to happen upon this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would love for you to introduce our guest. We just had her host a webinar for us, and if you missed the webinar, it's okay because you can still sign up to watch the replay. You're going to want to make sure after you hear today's that you go back and listen to that, and we'll have the link to that in the description down below. But Tiffany, why don't you introduce our guest to us today? We'll bring her on and get started.
Yeah, well, we are so blessed once again to just bring on Pastor Jenni Wong Clayville. And she is originally from Seattle, Washington. Her and her family now live in the Washington, D.C. area. She is married. She has 2 sons. She is currently serving at National Community Church as the weekend experience pastor. And she's also part of the teaching team at the Northern Virginia location. And so she's had 2 decades of experience in ministry. She has served in multiple roles, even worship pastor. She has been an executive pastor, youth pastor, you name it. Jenni's probably done it. She also is currently serving in the leadership team for Leading and Loving It, and also Propel Ecclesia, which I had the pleasure of being in the very first class that went through that. That's where Jenni and I met. And so it's just been an awesome opportunity to get to glean from her. And she is here with us today. And I am so excited to have her share with us on women in leadership.
That is awesome. Well, let's go ahead and welcome her. Welcome, Jenni.
Hi, ladies. I love, Nikki, that you said rad. That definitely took us back a couple decades.
Yes. I mean, what can I say? I'm older than the filters let on, but you know.
Well, Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes, so excited. Well, Jenni, we're so excited to have you on here. And it's just such an honor to have you because I know how much of an impact Propel and specifically the Ecclesia cohorts have had. Tiffany's told me amazing stories. And, you know, I follow all of the Leading and Loving It stuff on Instagram. So it's just an honor to have you here today.
Oh, thank you. It's my privilege. Anytime I get to plug in and be with other women, I'm going to be like, yes, sign me up. So let's do this. Yeah, let's hang out.
That's pretty rad.
Nice, Tiffany. Nice.
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
It's
I
the
love
theme now.
Absolutely. We're gonna have a rad new year.
Yes,
Uh,
totally.
Awesome. Well, Tiffany, why don't you, since you have an amazing personal connection with Pastor Jenni, why don't you kick us off with the first question today?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive in. So, Jenni, you have so much experience in leadership and in ministry. And so, can you just share with us what your journey has been like as a female in ministry?
Oh man, that's kind of a loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so when I was a teenager, I remember feeling called to be in ministry, but I'd never seen what that looked like. It was men, mostly all men, and then there was like pastors' wives, and then there were background singers, and then there was, all the ones that served in kids ministry. And that's kind of like the only places, at least in my experience, of where I could see it. And I, of course, really felt at that time, now in hindsight, knew that it was a calling. I just didn't know how that was going to manifest in itself, right? And so as time went on, there were more and more places for me to volunteer in. And then from serving in worship, all of a sudden I jumped into like a worship leader position, and then it became a worship pastor position, and on and on and on. And so God kind of paved a way, and he just, where there was no way, he kind of paved a way in that. And but for the longest time I felt like I was by myself. And so didn't see a lot of women in ministry. You'd see women speaking, like you could see like Beth Moore speaking, but she wasn't a pastor. Like she was just speaking to other women. So what does it mean, and what does it look like to lead both men and women as a woman? And so, my experience has been fortunate in many ways, where I've had many allies that have given me a platform and given me training and resourced me. Not that I didn't have a difficult time. There were things that, let's be honest, all women kind of get looped or like pushed into a label if they are more assertive or more efficient. I've been called all the names. I receive it gladly. God is going to restore that someday. But yeah, so there's things where I think we have already paved the way, our generation, for women in ministry behind us, because we're seeing more and more women in ministry. And so I think that the experience I've had has been everything from maybe in being invited to the table as like a quota thing, because for me it's not just being a woman, but it's being Chinese American. So being a minority that like checks two boxes, right? So you're invited to the table, but you're not really allowed to speak at the table. And that's a very frustrating place to be, because that's not being like, it's not really a releasing of the skills that God gave you or the giftings that God gave you. And so I'm very, very glad that I have had more allies than not kind of help usher and like pave a way for me. And so I now feel like my job is to do the same for those next to me and behind me. And so we're going to pull up as much as we can, because kingdom work is not sitting on one person. It's on all of us that are called. And so that's kind of where that's like the short version of my journey. But I do really believe that without women in ministry and without women leading church in some way or another, that we are not balanced, because there's men and women. So therefore you need both.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really great. I feel like we've all probably had similar journeys in ministry in kind of coming up. And so there's a strange sense of comfort in knowing that, we're not alone in this. And, we've all kind of been through it, so to speak. And so if there's anybody who's just coming up now, don't be discouraged, because you're certainly not the first one to have gone through it.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so that's very encouraging. Jenni, you lead both men and women in your different ministry contexts. So I got to ask the question, what has been some of your experience in the differences between leading men, leading women, and how have you seen the male leaders kind of have a little bit of a different experience in your context?
Well, it's all tiers, right? There's multiple tiers of these things. And so I don't think it's necessarily fair to lump them all in the same category, because There are kind men that are allies, and then there are jerk men that are not. And I don't necessarily think they're trying to be jerks. I think that they really feel like that's what they're supposed to be doing. And so I think my experience has been anywhere from men taking my ideas and using them as their own
Mm.
to men that have gate kept and not allowed me in, which in hindsight, I'm like, that's fine. At the time, it was hurtful, but now I'm like, okay, well, God is bigger than all that. But then I've also had really great experiences where men have asked me, like we're all around the table and the conversations have like going on, and I'm observing, and they stop everything and they say, hey, Jenni, what do you think about this? And so being invited to speak into that. So I have had terrible experiences. I had a friend early on in my career. I say career because it's just vocational ministry, which is weird in itself when we really think about it. But we were doing ministry together, and he was a good friend of mine. And he said to me that he actually felt at one point like, I don't think that women should be leaders in the church according to what the Bible says. And I said, I want to challenge you in that. And I want you to read it in context, like read the Bible in context. But I was also young at that time, and I was in my early 20s. And I don't think I had the language that I do now, plus the studying and just the contextual understanding of what Paul was saying in Timothy. And so, well, one of many places, right? And so, just addressing those things, but like having an experience of that, of just being heartbroken in that, feeling like, well, I didn't have a choice in being a woman, but here I am, and yet God has still called me. And then yet years later, the same friend coming back and saying, hey, I was wrong. And so that was very healing for me, and just having those experiences. So I've had both and the whole spectrum. I would say, actually, to be honest, both of you guys, like, I think some of my harder times have been with women
Mm.
that have felt like, no, there's only space for one of us. And so there's blocking, and there's this false narrative of there's not enough room for both. And I refuse to be that way. I probably was like that at some point too, because that's just the narrative that we all have. And so there's grace and there's forgiveness in that. And so, yeah, that's kind of like the experience I've just had kind of across the board, and my life isn't over. So we'll see what moves on, from this point on. So.
Yeah. It's so good, Jenni. So let's talk a little bit more about obstacles and opposition. Especially let's talk about male and female, right? Because if we're honest, it comes from both areas.
Yeah.
I myself have had leaders in the church get up and walk out of the sanctuary because I got up on the platform to preach.
Yep.
So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you handle opposition when it comes at you?
So personally, I ask a lot of questions. I just have to remember, this is hard, but it feels personal, but it's not. It is the context of how they have interpreted scripture, and they're doing the best with what they can. Now, are they bigots? Yes. But also, they are doing the best with what they can. And so me coming at them does not help the situation, because they already don't think I'm qualified, right? But if I can posture myself in a way that is listening and understanding, not a punching bag, that's different, listening and understanding, and then just saying, hey, I don't agree with you. We practice at NCC, National Community Church, our church. We practice this four practices of peacemaking, and it's to ask anything, to listen well, to disagree freely, and to love regardless. And so often we ask anything, or we just come at you, and then we do not listen well. And so I want to practice listening well all the way. And then I want to make sure that I clarify, hey, I don't know where those balloons came from, by the way.
I
Was
don't
that me?
either. I don't know what that was.
I don't know. We're just gonna celebrate. If you're just listening, you
Celebrate
missed
that
out.
moment.
You need to come back and watch.
That was
And
rare.
watch the video. But that was hilarious. I just watched the two of your faces going, "What the heck?" We're celebrating. Listen, we're celebrating the 4 practices of peacemaking.
That's right.
But anyway, jump back. Like, we need to learn how to disagree freely. As women, I don't think we become doormats. I think we say, I don't agree with you, and this is why, but I understand why you think. Like, our job is to help them maybe mirror our grace and mirror our choice to listen and have a good conversation, right? And so in the end, I have actually gotten this more from women of like they shouldn't be preaching than men actually,
Mhm.
that I should be preaching. And I would say that's my sister or that's my brother. And there was a time that I read scripture and it was maybe not quite right. And God was gracious enough with me that I'm still one alive to learn and I'm not done learning. And so I just pray over them and don't fight it. Like it is not personal as it feels.
It's
Yeah,
good.
that's so true. In our particular corner of the faith world, we've been ordaining women for over 100 years, and yet
Hmm.
in a lot of ways, it feels like we're just scratching the surface, and we're still in the let's normalize it type of a phase,
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
it definitely feels like it's a slow growth process, and
Yeah,
that's one of the values that we have at Women of SoCal is that in regards to women specifically, we are better together. Like, let's champion
absolutely.
one another in our callings, in the various things that we're doing.
Hmm.
But it sounds like you've done a lot of growth, and especially in this particular area. But out of all of the areas that you've grown in your leadership skills and along your journey, what's one or two things that you've valued most in your growth as a leader?
That's a great question. One, that you're never done growing.
Mm,
I think the older I get, the more I realize I don't know anything. And so it's very humbling and it's a little bit devastating, let's be honest. So I just know that I'm going to learn more. And in 5 years, I'm going to look back and go, oh my gosh, what an idiot. And just the next 5 years, I'll look back and go, oh, what an idiot. And I think that's okay. And I think that actually, I think God is delighted in that because that means that we are leaning more toward Him, right? So that's probably one thing. And then the second thing is that I can't do anything without a community. So growing up, I don't think I felt very isolated, and a lot of it is probably my culture or the mix of culture. Being Chinese American is very, and being born in the United States puts me in a liminal space. So it didn't necessarily feel like I fully belonged. I didn't fully belong anywhere. And so a lot of this probably in my head more. Granted there was definitely like discrimination, but I would say that it fed and lived rent free in my head, and for a long time I thought I was just safer being alone, which is not the case. I am stronger when I am within community and knowing who the community is. Like, don't cast your pearls to swine, right? But you need to have community. Jesus had his 3, then he had his 12, and then he had his 5,000. So knowing who that is, so often we are, especially as women, we see people that are speaking, that are doing the circuit, and we want to be there. And the truth is, what's important and what Paul lived, if you look at any of Acts, is the kneecap to kneecap community, person right in front of them. I What I love most about ministry is not that I go and travel and speak. What I love most is being back on Sunday and being here during the week so I can pour into my people that are actually leaders and leading others, and also invest in the people that are right in front of me that are in my congregation that need Jesus, so that when things happen, I'm aware of what's happening around them. So don't be, don't be don't allow yourself to be taken away and distracted by what seems to be sexy of the world, or like being a celebrity Christian, because that's just kind of gross. Like, there's nothing celebrity about being a Christian. If you are really doing what Jesus called us to do, you will suffer. Your life will not be great. It will not be in celebrity status. And so I don't know about you, but I'd rather not do the suffering in front of everyone. I'd rather suffer maybe less in front of a platform. But that's just me being selfish. So those are maybe like the two things that I've learned the most. And that is me as an Enneagram 3. Like, I'm larger than life. I love people. Tiffany knows this. I love entertaining people. I love it when people laugh. But it does not, if it's not in congruency with the kingdom of God, all of it is really worthless.
mm,
So that's kind of what I've learned.
mm. So
So
good.
good. I love what you said about community. And I think let's talk a little bit about community and leadership. So
Yeah.
we work with men, and I've had men that have opened doors for me, who have mentored me, who have propelled me and pushed me
Hmm.
to step up on that platform and championed me. And I feel like it's so important as we bring up women leaders behind us that we are effectively showing them and walking this out, right? What does it look like to have healthy male female relationships within leadership and ministry? And how can we effectively model that for those coming up behind us?
That's really a great question, Tiffany, because I think we have over sexualized as the church relationships between men and women. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be caution. That is very, very important. I think when the minute you say, as a married woman, I will never have an affair, or as a single woman, being friends with a married man, I'll never have. I mean, that's the minute that you've lost it all. Because when you say never, Satan's like, watch this.
Mhm.
So I think going in the posture of this could happen and being aware, that's the most important thing. So always be aware of what you're going into, but do not be afraid of it. Fear is not from God. God created both male and female for his kingdom. And we do not have a balanced and a full kingdom if we're both not in it and we're not both working together. I have now I'm very invested in women, but I do pastor men and women because I don't think the reason I pour mostly into women is because I want women to understand how important their role is. So often women are like um trying to shrink themselves when God has created us in this time in this place to take up all of our space, right? And so I want to encourage women to take up their space. And but the other thing too is to make sure that men, like I think so often, like you said, Tiffany, like there were men that made a way for you. When they ask, how can I help? The answer is help be an ally by doing this. Invite more women in the conversation. If a guy has a problem with you speaking on the platform, that is now this man's job to come around and ask those questions and say, and this is why I believe that. So that's one thing, a wraparound way of answering what it was. But I think you having conversations, having the awkward conversation up front is so super, super important. So I work very closely with my worship pastor. He serves under me. I'm his boss, but we're very close. Now, ministry is very different from business because it taps into not just the physical of the actual work. I don't mean body physical. I mean like the physical work, but it taps into the spiritual side, which becomes very intimate, whether you like it or not. So being aware is super important. But when we first started working together and realized that we actually enjoy each other's company in the most innocent of way, we had a conversation. Here are our boundaries. And we're having this conversation so that if it becomes awkward, we've already had an awkward conversation, right? So you have to be willing to have that conversation. Now, there's the Billy Graham rule. There was a time that I actually did the Billy Graham rule. For those of you who don't know that what that is, it's never being alone with someone of the opposite gender. I'm not sure that's the best way to go all the time because as a woman, that means I can't actually pastor a male. Now, be wise about it. Like obviously if a male has just lost his wife to whatever, the intimacy grows closer. Bring someone with you. Bring someone make it a third person, right? But it doesn't mean you can't call them, you can't text them. Again, I think it just starts with being aware and being willing to have those really radical candor conversations and really just the awkward conversations up front. And the more intimate the relationship is, the more you have to have it because there's nothing wrong with intimacy. God didn't create intimacy just for marriage because he's called a brother and sister relationship in the church. We just don't know how to do it. So let's have a conversation about how to do it better. That's the only thing I have for you.
I love that. That's amazing. Especially, I work in my other job. I also pastor at a church, and I work side by side with men on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And I think I heard you say this again, plug back to the webinar that we just had with you a couple weeks ago. I think I heard you say your husband is not in vocational ministry. Is that
He's
correct?
not. He's
That's
not.
that's something that the three of us all have in common.
Mhm.
And I just ask this bonus question? What are some areas as a woman in ministry and your husband is not? What advice could you give to a woman in that particular situation?
Yeah. So my husband is very involved in ministry. He's just not a pastor. So he actually oversees one of the largest men's group. Our church is weird. Well, we don't really have women's groups, but we have like a very huge thriving men's group. It's rare, and I do want to say it's because we have men like my husband in it he's pastoral in every way, right? But my husband does serve with me. Now that's a privilege I have. Not every woman has that. And he's very willing to get into nitty-gritty. And so if there's ever a need that occurs, that I need someone to reach out, I'll ask him and he'll do it. But I also have male colleagues that I can text up and say, "Hey, this just happened. Will you reach out?" I have the same thing. My other pastor that I work alongside with, when there's stuff that's happening and he's connected to a woman, he's like, "Hey, Jenny, will you come and pray with me with her?" I mean, it's just wisdom in like accessing your community. Like, know who your community is. There they are again.
Because
Those
that was a winning
balloons.
statement, Jenny. That was a
I
winning
I have no idea where these balloons are coming from.
I've literally never seen that before in my life. So, but you know
I'm
what?
not even touching anything, and I'm just I don't
statement.
know. I don't know
I'm
if you're
going to
gonna
go with
cut that
Tiffany's
out.
assessment. It's a winning statement. So that's awesome.
Whoever's listening to this needs to just watch the video because it is out of control. These balloons that are
Yeah. We're
coming out of
celebrating
nowhere.
the new year here.
That's
Okay. It's a
Happy New
party.
Year.
Yes. Happy New Year. It's a party.
Incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think those are really wise words. And I know my husband is also very supportive and
Mm,
he serves on our worship team, but he is in the medical field. So he's not in vocational ministry at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
He just serves as a volunteer, but he supports me in so many ways. And I often tell him, I'm not supposed to have favorites, but he is my favorite pastor's wife. So,
Mm,
one of them, because I also really love my co pastor's wife.
yeah,
She's amazing.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So thank you so much for that. Do you have any other encouragement for women as they grow in their leadership in church, as they kind of, work their way through their journey and their calling? Do you have any other words of encouragement for women?
Yes. I think there's a whole spectrum of women. I think there's many women that have people that are helping pave the way for them, and I'm not saying it's hard, or I'm not saying it's easy, but it is easier. And I think that's really, really great. And I think if you are in that place, just thank God for that. Really thank God for that, and just spend less time complaining and just live in gratitude, because there's a lot of women that are listening right now who are the only woman either on staff or they've been given a really like much lesser title, and they're doing everything. They're doing everything that a titled pastor would do, but you're doing it under another title of either director or assistant or coordinator. And so for those of you who are there, know that not only do we see you, but God sees you.
Yeah.
And it's not about the title, it's about the kingdom work. And what I want to encourage you to do, and I do believe this is biblical, in Esther, it talks about for such a time as this, you don't have any other time. We do not believe in like reincarnation, right? And so this is your time, whatever season it is. So take up your space. You were not born to shrink back. You were not born to be a doormat. You were not born to be the center of the stage either. You were born to do the most with what you have for kingdom causes, which is a kingdom mindset, not an empirical one that we have created as mankind. So take up your space. We'll do whatever you need to get to that place, whether it's counseling, whether it's plugging into cohorts or groups, which, by the way, Ecclesia is incredible. I'm going to plug Ecclesia for a second here. So Propel Ecclesia, just go look them up on Propel. Tiffany went through this. She was in the first cohort. This is an opportunity. If you are the only woman even if you're not, but if you're the only woman and you need community of women that are just like you, that are going the same direction, this is the place to go. There's an application process. We've already started this cohort for this series or this time of year, but the application process takes a minute. So just go on the website, apply, and let's get you in the next cohort because you need to have community. That's the first thing that I would say. Another resource is something called Leading and Loving It. This is more for women that honestly, there's cohorts there and they're a little bit different. But what I would say Leading and Loving It is really great at is for many of us who lead in a space that we can never get away, we're always under the eyes of people. This is a place that you can go and you can worship and you can lose it and you can just be you and be poured into. It was originally called Retreat. And I am someone who does not like women's events. And I have done this for over a decade. So it's a place where you can laugh, you can cry, and you can just be yourself. It happens every October in Vegas. So, it's not very expensive because Vegas is very cheap to get to. And just bring people that you want to be with, or just go by yourself and kind of disappear. But we do really believe that you should do things in community. So the big thing I want you to walk away with is take more space, resource yourself, whether it's going back to school or being a part of cohorts or being in community or going to counseling. Like, invest in yourself because you are the biggest thing that you can steward. We read in the Bible of what are you going to do? What are you going to steward? When the master gives you X amount of money, are you just going to dig a hole and cover it up, or are you going to invest it? So you are the best thing to steward. So invest in yourself, be great. God sees you, he hears you, he loves you. We see you, we hear you, we love you. There's resources. There's so many resources out there, and you are not the only one. And we want to make all of us better. Let's pull up for each other.
Yeah, it's so good. I love that, Jenni. And I think it's so important. Community was huge for me. If you don't have community around you, there weren't female pastors within my local area that I could, come alongside of and have them mentor me. So I had to be intentional and I had to reach out, and Ecclesia was the answer to that. It was the first time I got to go to an event where there was women, but it wasn't your typical women's event. It was leaders, and we were talking about, all kinds of leadership issues and topics. It was a completely different environment. And I was like, this is home, I love this. And so I just want to encourage everybody who's listening and watching, like, hey, find it. If you don't have it in your area, if you don't have it in your church, then go outside of their four walls and seek it out. And God's going to open up opportunities. He's going to bring people to you, situations, cohorts, different things, but do whatever you have to do to get in fellowship and community with other females who are leading. And it's just so important because as female leaders, we do lead differently from men, and it's not bad. It's not wrong. We're different. And like, we talked about before, that it's both of us working together that make the church complete. And so we need to be able to lead like God has called us and equipped us and designed us to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So true. Well, this has been such a valuable conversation. And Jenni, thank you so much for your words of wisdom and for sharing your story and your journey with us. This has been such an honor to have you on the podcast. And Tiffany, thank you for bringing your great leadership skills to this episode. It's been so wonderful to co-host with you, but I am excited to see where season 2 is going to take us. This has been a great way to kick it off. It's been a winning episode. We've celebrated, we've thrown balloons up in the air. It's just been such a great way to kick off the new year. And so I really hope that if you are listening or if you are watching this podcast, you will join us in the future as we put out more episodes this year for season 2. We hope that you will join us at Women of SoCal AG on both Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. And you can check us out at socalnetwork.org/women for all of the events and resources that we have coming up for you. It's really going to be a great year, no matter what role you serve in, no matter how you lead in your local church, whether you have a title or not, whether you are a pastor's wife, a women's ministry leader, a credentialed woman, or you are a woman sitting in the pew just trying to figure out this whole faith journey. We want to be a resource and a leadership place for you. We want to provide some of that community for you. So thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.